I worked in a rock mine. I drove those big mining trucks. I loved it. I worked with nothing but a-holes, but they were nothing but old guys, cavemen, literally. Long old beards and stinky old men. Ugh. I love driving those big mining trucks, those 60-ton mining trucks. Wow. Just down in the 300-foot deep mine. Are you kidding me? That was awesome. Anyways, another tale of the rocket mines. The rock mines. I was expecting hard work and maybe some shoveling going into work that night. Oh, it was a hard job. But nothing like what occurred. I was topside. Earth level. That night, driving a 769 haul truck. Those things look like Tonka trucks. It resembled a Tonka truck on steroids. It was 2 stories tall and just as wide, with a payload capacity of 60 tons. And it could go 20 miles an hour loaded with 60 tons of material. That was a massive engine. I drove to the plant where limestone is ground into different textures and sizes of rock and lime. The plant was massive. It had 100-foot long conveyor belts, moving tons of rock to the bins in 4 6-story tall bins with screens at the top. Each bin had different sizes of screens, and only certain rocks went into them. That made sense. Computers mixed the rock material to the specifics of the plant operator and dropped each type of gravel, railroad ballast, granular, and asphalt rock mixture needed to be made that night. Sometimes the bins would plug up at the bottom where the clamshell was, and we'd bang on them with a 10-pound sledgehammer that loosened the material so it would flow onto the conveyor belt into the clamshell. A lot of times the screens would get too full on top of the bins, and we'd have to climb 110 stairs to the top and shovel the screens clear of excess limestone or lime. Mind you, we were climbing inside a sifter, okay? Just picture yourself under a sifter with powdered sugar and it dusting all over you while you're climbing 110 stairs. So you're not getting oxygen. You're breathing in lime dust and cold air and who knows else going up those stairs. Okay, picture that. 110 stairs to the top and shovel the screens clear of excess limestone or lime. And those screens were 20 feet off the ground, from little catwalks that were like 2 feet wide. Yeah. But the one job you would never want to do is shovel 3-inch jagged limestone rock off a conveyor belt. 3-inch rock. Jagged rock. You know the rock that settles against each other when they're in a pile? You can barely stick a shovel. Yeah. I don't know what was worse, the cold, wet weather, or the shoveling, or how high up I was while shoveling. And I hadn't eaten that night yet, or that day, so I was getting lightheaded. And I was on a catwalk. I was wider than the catwalk I was on. Yeah. That catwalk was 2 feet wide. The conveyor belt hit me at the chest, and it was at a slant like that. So imagine me, conveyor belt right here to me, a shovel, trying to shovel it off because the engine belt to that motor burnt out in the wheelhouse up there. And they didn't want to ruin the other belt when they started up the conveyor belt after they changed it. So we had to take some of the weight off it and just check it over our shoulders to let it fall 100 feet down. Yeah. There was only 2 bars keeping me from my death. The misty, sprinkly rain, the cold, sharp winds, and the deep, cold mud was a good start to any day. I would have rather have been in the 60-degree mine 300 feet down than brave the windy, cold, and misty weather topside. This was the day when the plant operator wasn't paying attention and checking the belts during a walkthrough of the plant, checking all motors and conveyor belts for wear and tear. After taking several loads to different piles around the property for storage, I heard what I never liked to hear. Go ahead and park it and grab your shovel and head over to the conveyor 3. I thought we were probably going to have to shovel underneath a roller assembly or around a motor that had been piled up with lime dust. Instead, the conveyor belt motor belt broke. But the conveyor belt 2 kept going and piled up the motor house for conveyor belt 3. It was a long walk through knee-high mud. When I got to the stairs, I threw the shovel onto my shoulder and started my climb up 100 steep stairs. Out of breath and sweating, I made my way over to the motor house where they were replacing the belt. Then the supervisor said, "Start at the bottom of the conveyor belt and work your way up, shoveling off the belt." I headed down to the bottom of the conveyor belt, looking at all the 3-inch rock I was going to be shoveling. The catwalk to the conveyor belt was at a 30-degree angle, and the conveyor belt was a little over waist high to me. It was piled a foot deep with 3-inch rock. I asked myself, how am I going to do this? Then the voice in my head told me, just do it, wimp. So I did. Shoveling rock over my shoulder for a half an hour just about did me in. I was wet from the rain and sweat, and I was out of breath. My arms were numb and shaking, and I was starving. That's when we were told to shovel out the motor house. There was about a dump truck load of rock covering the stairs, inside and all over the roller assembly. I was so cold and wet and sore that I wanted to fall in the mud and scream and cry. I couldn't get back to my truck fast enough and turn on the heater. You would not believe how fast those trucks warm me up. Those engines, man, they cranked out the heat. It dried up my pants. The mud just started falling off. It was drying my pants out, my boots. I couldn't believe how much mud was all over me. Then it started to dry, and I was knocking it off and fighting the cloud of lime dust it produced. It was like I'd been at a mining boot camp the whole shift, and I don't think I'll ever look at a shovel the same way again. The next day, the same guy was sick again for the topside crew, and the boss said so sweetly, "Lottie, since you did such a good job shoveling yesterday, I'll keep you on topside to help the guys out again. They need to shovel out from under the conveyor 1. All the guys looked at me, waiting for me to complain. I just put a big smile on my face and said, "I'll meet you ladies over there," and walked to my truck. I wasn't about to be broken by anyone, not even those guys. Here's another one. Where is that one about Red Bear? That's a really good one. Here it is. He was at the mine. He was redheaded, and his mom had married what was he? Oh. His mother married a Blackfoot Indian, and she was part Navajo. I don't know how that went out. Well, I think she already had him when she married that Indian guy. Because Red Bear had this bright red curly hair, bright blue eyes, and pale skin with freckles, and there was no Indian in him. But he called himself Red Bear, and he was a Native American, as far as he was concerned. I mean, he had the peace pipe, the tobacco, the flute, the stories, you name it, and he was one hell of a nice guy. I mean, he was like an instant best friend to me, a really good friend. The rest of the guys were just horrible to me at that mine. I liked him. A story about a spirit named Red Bear. I can't even remember his first name. What was his first name? Oh, my goodness. No, it's not that I don't care about that guy. It's just, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning and I can't remember his first name. I'm sure it's in here somewhere. A story about a spirit named Red Bear. He was soft-spoken, stood proudly, had broad shoulders, and red wavy hair pulled back into a ponytail. His hat was pulled down, and the brim partially covered his blue eyes. I had some thoughts as to why he was so quiet and let the guys call him Chief and Injun. I wondered how ignorant they could be to call him that. Did they think he was a Native American? I decided those old men were hitting the sauce kind of heavy before they came to work. I think half those guys were drunk when they came into work. For a couple of days I had wanted to talk to the quiet man about the name-calling. I was walking by his locker and noticed a photo of a couple dressed in Indian powwow regalia. It looked like a picture that belonged in a museum. The woman standing behind the man had auburn hair with beads and feathers braided into her shoulder-length flowing hair. She wore a patchwork skirt with a calico ribbon shirt and a turquoise and silver belt with round silver medallions with turquoise centers. She stood in beaded sandals. The man sat on a wooden stump with a dancing stick decorated with eagle feathers, leather straps, and beadwork at the base. The stick was propped on his knee, and he had one arm resting on the top of it. He wore a chest plate adorned with hornhair pipe and bone pipe with brass beads. His shirt was a light brown leather war shirt, intricately decorated with small beads. The long sleeves were fringed. His fringed leggings were decorated with silver medallions and turquoise. An apron hung in the front. They were historically beautiful people. Everything about them showed their pride in their tribal culture. I stopped and told him I liked that picture and asked him how old it was. I was guessing probably 200 or more years old. I was thinking I thought he was like a historian or something. You know, history buff. He said they had that done last year. I asked him who they were. He said, they're my mother, Nizhoni, in Navajo means beautiful, and my father, Apisi, in Blackfoot means coyote. Their names have stuck in my head for a while, but I had to look up their meaning. That day we talked more about what his parents did and how they danced, sang, played instruments, and told stories at powwows, festivals, and fairs. It was funny when he said, if you want to, you can come to my sweat lodge. I looked at him and said, what? He said, the sweat lodge helps you reconnect your mind, body, and spirit. I usually have one every month, or unless someone needs one. I asked him what they did in the lodge. He said, you sit in a circle and pray and talk to the spirits. Sometimes your spirit animal will come to you if you really need them. A friend spoke out during one of the sweat lodge meetings and said he felt hot air blowing on his neck and rough hair on his shoulder. I told him it was Brother Buffalo visiting him, because the buffalo was his spirit animal. I told him I didn't want to visit the sweat lodge. He laughed and said, why pass up a chance to be in a lodge with old naked men? I told him, first, I don't want to see old naked men, and second, with my luck, my spirit animal would be a grizzly bear, and I really don't want one visiting me. It could be messy. He laughed and said, maybe next time. I said, maybe not. I know I don't have the red skin, but my spirit is Native American, and my name is Red Bear, the red-haired white man said. He never responded when the guys would chant, hi-ya-ya-ya, hi-ya-ya-ya, or when he'd walk by and they'd call him Injun or Chief. It's embarrassing that through the years those slang words have lasted so long, and that people still use them as if they were funny. Red Bear was a Native American in spirit, and would never denounce his adopted heritage. I was proud to know him, and he told great stories. And he was basically the only one, besides the two guys that were hired on with me, that talked to me, that treated me with respect. I mean, none of the other guys had any other reason not to treat me with respect. They were just intimidated by me because I was a woman. And I was the only woman working for a mine and driving truck in that whole freaking country, I think, at that time. Red Bear, I'm not sure if he had any siblings, but he blew the flute a lot. He did that when he was training me in the elephant stones down in the mine. Excuse me, I have to situate myself. And he would tell me stories, kind of Indian stories, you know, and he had that Indian accent, you know, that just the way he talked, kind of like this, you know. He'd talk about the spirit animals and how they loved you and they wanted to, you know. He just, if you didn't see him, you'd think you were talking to a Native American. But, he was a very good man. He lost his wife to cancer a couple of years back. He called her his half-side. I don't understand that, but they were very close in their marriage. I think they were married for 30 years, maybe. They had a son, I think. Big, chubby, black-haired kid. I don't know how that came out of him, but... And, he had a hard time at that mine. Those guys wouldn't stop teasing him every day. Oh, it annoyed me. And Red Bear had been working there for, I think, 7 years or something like that. He told me it was like every day they were like, hey, yeah, hey, Chief, hey, Injun, you gonna kill some buffalo? You know, stupid stuff like that. And they would call his wife, squaw. I guess that's, whore in, I don't know what language. But he turned him in for that, and they still didn't stop. There was a guy that had gotten fired after I told Red Bear, because he ran to the boss. The guy was training me. He was, you know, you're sitting in a room and you're looking around, and that guy was the biggest a-hole in that room. I'm thinking, he's probably going to be the one that's going to be training me. Yep. Oh, I hated that. 12 hours with that dirty thing. Nasty. He had the worst attitude. And he finally told me, he says, you know what? I don't think you're really cut out for this job. You're probably better off working somewhere else. I really don't think this is a good place for you. I just sat there, like, I just wanted to shrink and blow away, you know. I wanted out of that truck so bad. Well, I went and told Red Bear, and he told somebody else, and somebody else told the boss, and the boss comes and gets me off the bus in front of everybody. Hey, Lottie, can I talk to you? Sure! And I get in the truck with him, and he asked me, he says, did so-and-such, I can't even remember the guy's name, say something to you? And I told him what it was, and he goes, he did? You know, like, he goes, well, I'm sorry that he said that to you. You shouldn't have said that to you. We are glad that you're here, blah, 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 blah. Well, they fired him for that. And come to find out, that's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. He was a nasty. Well, it was kind of coincidental. And I don't think it was a coincidence. But they made it kind of look like it. But I think they kept me topside because of me getting him fired. I didn't fire him. He's the one that said it. I didn't turn him in. But they thought I got their buddy fired. And after that came out, I didn't go down and work in the mine, but maybe like twice after that. They kept me topside. I just drove the 769s. I like driving the elephant stones down in the mine better, but whatever. The guys were kind of a little bit kinder up top. They were younger and stupid. But, yeah, I liked working there. Food for thought.